The sun hung low over the endless savanna, its golden light spilling across the cracked earth like fire on bronze. Wind rolled through the tall, dry grass in waves, whispering the stories of a land that had not yet known language. The air was heavy with dust, heat, and the scent of wild beasts. In this raw and merciless cradle of existence, 5 early African hominids moved together through the open plains, their bodies lean and powerful, their skin glistening with sweat and dust. They were neither beasts nor fully men, but something in between, creatures awakening to purpose. Across their shoulders lay the massive carcass of a giant hyena, its spotted hide dull beneath the light, its heavy jaws still locked in a frozen snarl of death. Every muscle in their bodies strained beneath the weight, yet their eyes held something far greater than exhaustion, a spark of victory, of unity, of survival. The leader of the group, broader and older than the others, carried the front of the kill. His name would never be written, but his actions would echo through the marrow of generations. He had guided his small band through danger and drought, through nights haunted by predators, and days of hunger that hollowed their bellies. Around him, his companions grunted and breathed heavily, their movements bound not by words, but by instinct, by the first whispers of cooperation. They had learned to hunt not alone, but together. And in that unity, something ancient was changing. The savanna had taught them cruelty, but it was also teaching them the first lessons of civilization, to share, to defend, to plan. Above them, vultures circled in patient spirals, their shadows drifting silently over the dusty plain. The men knew the meaning of that sign: where there was death, there was danger. The smell of blood carried far. Behind them, hidden in the shimmering distance, scavengers would soon follow, drawn by the promise of a meal they had not earned. And yet the group pressed on, heads low, feet steady. Their destination was a cluster of thorn trees by a dried riverbed, where their tribe would be waiting, mothers, children, and the fragile continuation of their kind. But every step was a gamble, every heartbeat a wager against the wild. For out here, the line between hunter and hunted was thin as the horizon itself. To their left, the grass trembled, a whisper of movement, too quick to be the wind. One of the men froze, nostrils flaring. His dark eyes caught a flash of motion, a lone hyena, lean and hungry, crouched low with its teeth bared, watching. It had caught the scent of its fallen kin, and the primal law of the savanna cared nothing for kinship. Hunger erased all loyalties. In a sudden burst, the hyena lunged, not toward the men, but toward a small rabbit that darted from the grass. In an instant, the rabbit's cry cut through the air, sharp, fleeting, and final. The men paused, watching silently as the hyena tore into its prey, bones snapping under jaws that could crush stone. It was a brutal sight, but a familiar one, a reminder that life and death were two sides of the same breath in this world. The leader exhaled slowly. His gaze lingered on the predator, then turned to his own kill, the fallen giant slung across their shoulders. In that moment, a realization flickered within him. He understood, not with words but with the deep pulse of instinct, that they had done what no other creatures dared. They had turned the balance. They had hunted the hunter. The hyena that stalked them was dangerous, but the one they carried had once ruled this territory. Its death marked more than a meal, it was a shift in the story of the earth itself. The weak had learned to fight the strong. Flesh had learned to fight with mind. As they continued walking, the world around them shimmered with life, elephants moving like mountains on the horizon, antelope bounding in sudden bursts of grace, and birds rising from the grass in clouds of wings and sound. The land was ancient, alive, and unforgiving. Every path was marked by bones. Every shadow could kill. Yet through it all, these early men moved with something that set them apart from all other beasts, a spark of awareness. They knew fear, but they also knew hope. They understood the value of persistence, of staying together, of watching the sun's path to find their way. Each scar on their bodies told a story not of defeat, but of survival earned through struggle. The wind changed direction, carrying with it a new scent, sharp, musky, alive. The leader stopped again. From the tall grass ahead, a sound echoed, a growl, low and rising. The group froze. Eyes darted. In the shimmering heat, another shadow took form, a second hyena, larger than the first, moving with silent power. Its yellow eyes gleamed with ancient hunger. For a moment, Predator and prey stood locked in stillness, the air between them heavy with tension. The men knew the danger, they had killed one, but they were weary, burdened. A single mistake could end them all. Yet they did not run. Not this time. They shifted their weight, gripping the crude wooden spears they carried, sharpened sticks hardened by fire and courage. The hyena stepped closer, circling, testing. Its growl deepened, echoing through the grass. The leader met its gaze, and in that moment, time seemed to slow. The story of Earth had always been one of teeth and claws, but something new was emerging here, the courage to stand against the wild. A spark of defiance burned in their eyes, and for the first time in this harsh and endless world, the hunted dared to challenge the hunter. And so they stood, dust swirling around them, the light turning orange and fierce. The dying day bore witness to a scene that would echo through ages, 5 weary beings, shaped by survival and bound by instinct, carrying the symbol of their first great victory, while facing the living embodiment of their greatest fear. The savanna was vast, indifferent, and eternal, but within its golden silence, something profound was stirring, the first heartbeat of human destiny. The sun had begun its slow descent, bleeding gold and crimson across the vast horizon. The air shimmered with heat, and the dry wind hissed softly over the brittle grass like a whisper of forgotten gods. The small band of early humans, sweat-soaked, weary, and carrying the heavy carcass of the giant hyena, moved with steady rhythm, their footsteps falling like drumbeats of survival upon the ancient earth. They did not speak, for words had not yet been born, but in their eyes burned a shared language of instinct and resolve. Their hands, rough and scarred, gripped the wooden spears with a familiarity earned through struggle. Each step was a declaration that they would not be prey, not anymore. The leader, his muscles trembling beneath the strain, cast a glance toward the western sky. His mind, still primitive but awakening, registered the coming darkness. Night was danger. When the sun fell, the savanna transformed into a living nightmare, eyes glinting in the dark, unseen predators stalking from the shadows, the cries of death echoing through the grasslands. He motioned to his companions, a subtle gesture that had become their language of survival. They understood. They needed to reach the riverbed before the light was gone. There, behind a barricade of thorn branches, their tribe waited, women nursing children, elders guarding the fire, the beating heart of their fragile species. They pressed forward. The plains stretched endlessly, rolling in waves of gold and ochre. Herds of wildebeest grazed in the distance, their silhouettes shimmering in the heat haze, while above, vultures followed patiently, tracing lazy circles in the fading light. The scent of blood from the dead hyena was thick in the air, a signal that drew attention from miles away. The leader knew this. His senses, sharpened by years of struggle, detected the approach of unseen watchers, hyenas, jackals, and perhaps even lions. He could feel it in the rhythm of the land, in the sudden silence of the birds, in the way the wind shifted and grew still. The savanna itself seemed to be holding its breath. Suddenly, a cry, low, guttural, and filled with urgency, rose from one of the men. From the right flank, movement erupted in the tall grass. A pair of hyenas burst into view, their spotted bodies moving in a blur of feral precision. Their eyes burned with hunger and vengeance, perhaps they sought to reclaim their fallen kin. The humans reacted not with panic, but with instinctive coordination. The leader dropped his end of the carcass, raised his spear, and gave a deep growl from his chest, a primitive roar that was part fear, part challenge. The others followed, forming a loose semicircle. They did not run. They faced the beasts. The first hyena lunged, its powerful jaws snapping at the nearest man's leg. The man dodged, but not fast enough. Teeth grazed his thigh, drawing blood. His scream pierced the evening air. The others responded with fury. A spear shot forward, striking the hyena's shoulder, and it yelped in rage, twisting away. Another spear found its flank, lodging deep. The beast staggered, blood spraying from its wound, and then collapsed into the grass with a final shudder. But the second hyena circled wide, cunning and relentless. It darted in and out of the shadows, searching for weakness, its snarls echoing like thunder over dry earth. The leader moved deliberately, his eyes fixed on the predator. He had learned from the hunt, from countless confrontations between life and death. He stepped forward, dragging his spear behind him, dust rising in his wake. The hyena growled, muscles coiling. In one swift motion, the man lifted the spear high, letting out a deep, guttural sound that reverberated through his chest, half roar, half command. For a heartbeat, both stood still, man and beast, predator and prey, equals in the law of the wild. Then, the hyena charged. The man thrust his spear forward with all the strength in his body. The wood splintered, the point driving through fur, flesh, and bone. The force of impact threw him backward, and he hit the ground hard. The beast collapsed beside him, trembling, snarling, dying. Silence followed, broken only by heavy breathing and the faint rustle of grass in the evening wind. The wounded man limped toward his leader, placing a trembling hand on his shoulder. They met eyes. No words, no smiles, but something passed between them: acknowledgement, understanding, pride. They had done what few creatures on earth could do. They had faced death and refused to yield. And in that defiance lay the seed of something extraordinary, courage born from unity. The group reassembled, retrieving their kill and broken spears. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in layers of fire and blood. The savanna glowed like molten gold, a living canvas of struggle and survival. They marched again, slower now, burdened by exhaustion but lifted by purpose. Their minds, though still primitive, were learning to remember, to carry knowledge forward like a hidden flame. They would recall how to strike, how to move together, how to build defense against the dark. These moments, fleeting and unspoken, were shaping the destiny of all mankind. As they neared the riverbed, the ground began to slope downward, the soil softening beneath their feet. The faint sound of trickling water reached their ears, a blessing in this world of thirst. The leader raised his head, sniffing the air. Smoke. Faint, distant, familiar. The fire of their tribe. Relief washed over him. They were close. The others, sensing it too, quickened their pace, grunting softly. The smell of charred wood mingled with the scent of ashen life, a symbol of protection that no beast dared cross. Fire was their weapon, their magic, their god. But before they reached the camp, the night fell fast. The last rays of sun sank beneath the horizon, and the world turned to shadow. The savanna came alive with the sounds of predators, the distant roar of lions, the shrill laughter of hyenas, the low rumble of unseen things. The men formed a tighter circle, spears ready, the carcass between them. Their hearts pounded like drums, every sound amplified in the darkness. The leader glanced toward the stars, faint and distant above the smoky haze. They had no names for them, yet something in their depths stirred awe. He felt, for the first time, the pull of wonder, the thought that there was more beyond this struggle, something infinite. They reached the camp at last. Firelight flickered against the trunks of trees, casting dancing shadows across the faces of those waiting. The women cried out softly, rushing forward, touching the hunters' arms, their faces, their wounds. Children peeked from behind their mothers, eyes wide with awe. The smell of blood filled the air, but so did the scent of triumph. The carcass of the giant hyena was laid before the fire, and for a moment, everyone stood in silence. Flames reflected in their dark eyes like tiny suns. They did not know it yet, but this moment, this act of shared victory, was the beginning of something eternal. The leader stepped forward, placing a hand upon the fallen beast. He looked into the fire, its light flickering across his weathered face. The warmth touched his skin, the shadows danced around him, and within that glow, a spark ignited deep in his soul. It was the birth of pride, of memory, of meaning. He did not have words to express it, but his heart understood. They had survived. And for the first time in the long, brutal story of life, survival carried something more than instinct. It carried purpose. Night embraced the ancient savanna like a living creature, vast, dark, and alive with unseen motion. The moon had risen pale and heavy, its silver glow spilling over the scattered thorn trees and the silent figures gathered around a flickering fire. Sparks drifted upward, vanishing into the endless black sky that stretched like eternity itself. The small tribe of early humans huddled close, the flames their only barrier against the hungry world beyond. The air was filled with the mixed scents of smoke, blood, and dust. The carcass of the giant hyena lay beside the fire, its hide beginning to crackle as the meat roasted. Shadows danced over the hunters' faces, turning them into living echoes of the wilderness, half beast, half something more. Something awakening. Something human. The leader sat nearest the fire, his body still aching from the battle, his breath slow and steady. The heat brushed his skin, drying the sweat and blood that clung to him. He stared into the flames, watching them twist and coil like spirits telling stories in light. Around him, the others murmured low sounds, grunts, hums, soft rhythmic noises that were not yet words but carried meaning. One of the women touched his wounded arm, pressing a poultice made from crushed leaves against the bleeding cut. He did not flinch. Pain was an old companion, what mattered was that he was alive. The others gathered closer, drawn by the fire's warmth and by something deeper, connection. It was not merely hunger that bound them tonight, but the instinct to belong, to protect, to remember. As the night deepened, the sounds of the savanna swelled a chorus of distant howls, rustling grass, and the sharp cries of creatures locked in their own battles for life. The tribe listened, their dark eyes gleaming with reflection. Every cry was a reminder of the fragile line they walked. They had hunted and killed, but they too could be hunted. The fire's light cast a small circle of safety, and beyond it lay the endless unknown. The leader lifted a piece of meat, still steaming, and passed it to the others. They tore it apart with their teeth, sharing without thought of ownership. It was an act older than language but filled with meaning, the beginning of community. Cooperation had brought them here, sharing would keep them alive. A small child, no older than 3 summers, crept forward and sat beside the leader. Her eyes were wide and curious, reflecting the fire like twin stars. She reached out a tiny hand, pointing toward the dark plains beyond the trees where the moonlight shimmered over the grass. The leader followed her gaze. Out there, far in the distance, the faint outline of a predator moved, perhaps a lion, perhaps another hyena. Its silhouette glided through the pale grass, silent and powerful. The leader watched without fear, only awareness. For the first time, he understood something wordless yet profound. The world would always be dangerous, but they were no longer powerless within it. They had fire, they had courage, they had each other. That was enough. He turned his gaze upward. The stars shimmered cold and distant, scattered like sparks from a divine flame. They seemed to whisper, though he could not yet grasp their language. But somewhere in his awakening mind, an idea began to form, a connection between the fire before him and the lights above. Both offered warmth in darkness, both defied the void. He felt, deep within, that their existence was not accidental. That realization, faint but real, was the dawn of thought. Not just instinct, but wonder. Not just survival, but meaning. The tribe slowly began to relax. Some slept, curled close to the embers. Others kept watch, spears in hand, eyes glinting in the low light. The leader remained awake, lost in the flicker of the flames. His thoughts drifted to the hunt, to the moment when they had faced the hyena, to the fear that had turned into strength, to the victory that had come not from brute force, but from unity. He remembered the way they had moved together, how one had distracted while the other struck, how they had trusted without words. That trust was power. It was invisible, but stronger than claws or fangs. It was what made them more than animals. It was what would carry their kind forward into the unknown centuries ahead. In the distance, thunder rolled softly, echoing across the plains. The scent of rain drifted on the wind, rare, sacred, life-giving. The leader raised his head, inhaling deeply. The others stirred, sensing the change. Clouds gathered over the horizon, and soon, drops of water began to fall, hissing softly as they struck the fire. Steam rose in ghostly trails. Instead of retreating, the tribe lifted their faces to the sky, letting the rain wash over them. It was cold, but it carried life. The children laughed, a sound pure and bright against the storm's deep rhythm. The leader stood slowly, spreading his arms to the sky, feeling the cool water cleanse the dirt and blood from his skin. For a brief moment, it felt as though the heavens themselves were acknowledging their survival. As the rain subsided, the world grew still again. The fire burned low, glowing embers painting the faces of the tribe in soft red light. The leader turned toward the horizon, where the faintest trace of dawn began to rise, a whisper of gold cutting through the darkness. A new day. A new chance. He knew, though he could not name it, that their kind had changed forever. The giant hyena's death was more than a victory over a predator, it was a symbol of awakening. They had faced the terror of the wilderness and emerged stronger, united. The memory of this night, this fire, this hunt, would live not in words, but in the patterns of their minds, passed on through generations like a sacred rhythm. Far in the distance, across the plains, other tribes existed, small, scattered, unaware of one another. Yet each was walking the same invisible path, each learning the same ancient lessons: to hunt, to fight, to protect, to hope. In time, these lessons would carve the shape of humanity itself. The leader did not know it, but his descendants would one day build villages, cities, and civilizations. They would paint on cave walls, sing to the stars, forge tools, and write stories. All of it, the entire arc of human history, began here, beneath this moon, beside this dying fire, in the heart of prehistoric Africa. The wind rose once more, sweeping through the grass with the sound of an ancient sigh. The leader looked out at the horizon, eyes reflecting both the firelight and the dawn. In that silent moment, he felt something stir inside him, a quiet determination that transcended hunger and fear. It was the first whisper of destiny, the faint pulse of evolution itself. He tightened his grip on the wooden spear beside him, the same weapon that had killed the giant hyena, and exhaled slowly. The darkness no longer frightened him. The fire crackled, the stars dimmed, and the first light of morning spread across the land, painting everything in gold. The tribe began to stir, their shadows stretching long and thin across the waking earth. The leader turned to his people, his family, his kind, and with a silent nod, led them forward. Together, they walked into the rising sun, carrying not just the spoils of their hunt, but the first spark of what would one day be called humanity.